All right, everyone, welcome in GC Live. Happy Monday and happy game week out there to everybody. Gamecocks, of course, kicking things off this Sunday against Virginia Tech in Atlanta. Hope everybody's doing well. We are presented by always here on GC Live by our friend Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans. That's ClintHammond.com. That's 803-422-6797. And his NMLS number, of course, is 71597. You probably got that memorized by now, everyone who listens on a regular basis. We appreciate you. Thanks for joining in with us. Keep in mind, of course, if you ever got any questions about home ownership, getting yourself a mortgage, hit up our guy, Clint, ClintHammond.com or 803-422-6797. I'm sure he'll have some great conversations with you. And the cool thing about Clint, big Gamecock Central subscriber, longtime subscriber, big Gamecock fan, he's going to be able to talk to you about the game that is going to be taking place this Sunday. So kind of a 2-for-1 there. I'm joined by Kevin Miller. Chris Clark here, joined by Kevin Miller of Gamecock Central. Kev, appreciate you, man. Thanks for joining me, especially on short notice, because we have a new addition to the Gamecock Central family. Our guy, Wes Mitchell, has brought a child into the world. His wife, more accurately, has.
Yeah, you got to fix that. That's right.
He's had a hand in it. So all the best to Wes. I've been chatting with him, of course, but he's taken a little bit of time, as he should, to be with his family and his new addition, Ansley Ann Mitchell. She's beautiful. So congrats to him. Maybe we'll have Wes back on later this week. I feel like we got to get Wes's game thoughts, at some point before the game. So we'll do that. But he's enjoying some time off, getting acclimated with everything. So he'll be back with us soon. So yeah, appreciate everybody wishing Wes a congratulations. Kev, how are things going your way, man? You ready for game week?
Yeah, it's here. It's been a long time coming, and week 0 just doesn't quite do it. Sorry to all of you week 0 truthers out there, but week 0 doesn't quite do it like week 1 does. So we have arrived. Yes, Farmageddon in Ireland.
It was.
I mean, there was some, post-game fight, and
sloppy game, entertaining. I got to watch a good chunk of it. I couldn't, man. I just, I know Stanford, Hawaii ended on a field goal at the end of the game, which is an exciting end to a game. I just couldn't bring myself to do much of that game. It just, yeah.
No.
It was not great. And Stanford, that just reiterated how far they've fallen from the Andrew Luck, Jim Harbaugh era to in a barn burner with Hawaii that they lost. No disrespect to Hawaii. So
Andrew Luck's back. So
he's kind of back, and that probably reinforced that Frank Reich might not be getting the interim tag removed for him. So we'll see. But yeah, you're right, man. Week 1, really getting this thing kicked off. Great slate of games beginning on Saturday. South Carolina, of course, on Sunday. And we're going to get into all that. There's a lot of ground to cover. Couple housekeeping notes. Shane Beamer, the schedule was kind of pushed back a day this week, which makes sense. Normally on a game week, we're rolling into a Monday. Shane Beamer's talking on Tuesday, kind of previewing the upcoming game, recapping the past one, all that good stuff. But this week, he'll be doing his kind of official game preview on Wednesday at a press conference, pushing that a day back. So, of course, complete coverage on GamecockCentral.com. And, yeah, we're going to get into the game in Atlanta here shortly. Do me a favor, everybody. In the comments, most of you listening on YouTube, as I hope you are, drop us a comment. Let us know if you're going to Atlanta or not. I'll be there. Kev, I know you'll be watching from home. Let us know if you're heading to Atlanta. Talk to a lot of Gamecock fans that are going there, and we'll get into it. But Kev, let's start here. Big news over the weekend on the recruiting front for South Carolina. I was up in Richmond at St. Christopher's High School. Beautiful campus, beautiful school out there, great people. And the Gamecocks picked up a 5-star offensive lineman in Darius Gray, culmination of a literally years-long recruitment. They've been recruiting this kid for about 3 years or so, but initial reactions or just happened a little while ago by now, but reactions to the Darius Gray commit. What'd you think, man?
I think it really just goes to reinforce the idea that Shane Beamer and his staff are really, I hesitate almost to use the word maximize, but they're pretty close to, I think, maximizing their efforts on the recruiting trail. When you think of South Carolina's history in the modern recruiting era, South Carolina had not landed a 5-star out of state that stayed a 5-star, right? You know, Chris Culliver kind of bounced in and out of that category a few times, right? But with Shane Beamer, you've now seen 3 with Nick Harbor, Dylan Stewart, and now Darius Gray. And as much as the offensive line has been stacking talent over the years, you know, and you're kind of waiting for that to turn into a really, really good and consistent group, and maybe that's this year, you look at it and you see that, oh, wow, Darius Gray could be one of the most talented of that entire group. And with his unique blend of just raw strength and kind of honestly freakish athleticism for a player his size, you got to love the pickup.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And of course, on cue, we have somebody in earshot of my house doing a little weed eating. So I apologize to everybody. We're working from the home office here. So we'll try to keep that to a minimum. I'll go yell at him shortly while Kev's talking. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a great point in that there were some things that I think you were hopeful for when you kind of looked at the blueprint of what Shane Beamer wanted to build. And the first thing you knew is, yes, he's going to bring some ties in Virginia, obviously, growing up in Blacksburg, having his dad, Virginia Tech. You had Torian Gray on staff. He played at Virginia Tech, still has ties. Sterling Lucas has some ties up there, etc. And you hope that in the DMV region, an area where South Carolina has gotten some players from before, that it would pay some dividends for them. That kind of plan to utilize the DMV, where frankly, Kev, you're up there in Maryland, in DC, in Virginia. South Carolina's the closest SEC school. The SEC is obviously a big draw to a lot of big time talent. Being the closest SEC program, if you want to get your foot in the door there as a prospect, it can be an advantage for you. And I think we've seen with Shane Beamer, he's made it such. You know, obviously Gray is the latest evidence, but you got Nick Harbor, right? You got Dylan Stewart, which was a huge get for the Gamecocks. Multiple out-of-state 5-stars, to your point. And so the other thing I think is from a culture standpoint, right? We all know South Carolina, if you're just doing a trophy comparing contest, is not going to win that battle most of the time or any of the time, because look at the schools you beat Darius Gray for. Clemson, his final 5, Clemson, Georgia, LSU, Tennessee, Ohio State. Mostly you beat Tennessee and LSU, really LSU, if you're just going to boil it down to that one competitor. These are programs that have championships that many would call blue blood type programs. And frankly, if you're going to take the program where you would like to take it, if you're Shane Beamer or if you're a fan of South Carolina, those are the schools that you've got to beat those programs for sometimes. So that makes it tough, right? And so I think you have to recruit, at least at the beginning of the build, a specific type of guy that's going to buy into a vision and that is a great cultural fit. And so, Kev, I know you followed Darius Gray's recruitment. I've got more to say on this part of the topic, but this seems like a really good kid, you know, to bring into the program, which does matter.
Yeah, it does. And you can tell that it was one of those recruitments that's very much two-sided. And what I mean by that is this wasn't a situation where, you know, South Carolina was really into Darius Gray and he was, you know, kind of into South Carolina and it eventually worked out, or vice versa, because that happens too. This was one where the mutual interest was high because he's a fit both positionally and stylistically, but also, as you said, with the culture. I mean, he visited South Carolina over 10 times. And you just made this drive this weekend. The drive to Richmond is not short. Like, you know, though South Carolina, you know, has the shortest route from that area to in the SEC, it's still not a short drive. It's not like just going to Charlotte. It's not like just going to Atlanta. It's a haul, and he made that trip more than 10 times, and it shows, I think, the real relationship that was developed there, the connection that was able to be had. And I think that's only possible because he's a fit culturally as well. Shane Beamer's program prides itself in that. Guys, as a general rule, guys don't really want to leave, and that makes an impact on guys who are thinking about coming there in the first place.
Yeah, it's a great point. Go ahead. You have more to say.
No, I was just going to say, Darius and other prospects have even talked about that point, that, guys go to South Carolina, and as long as they're playing, they typically don't leave. There have been a few here and there, but there's usually been other circumstances involved, right? It's not usually just like, I don't like it here. That's pretty rare. And when you look at a guy like Darius Gray willing to travel away from home, that had to be a big factor. But South Carolina putting so much effort into his recruitment showed just how much they wanted him, both as a player and as a person.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, we wrote about this not too long ago, that South Carolina under Beamer has actually gotten better in the retention game than when he first got here. And I think there are a lot of reasons for that. But, you can think about some of the guys that have left, where Juice Wells or Marshawn Lloyd or Jordan Birch, Jaheim Bell. Like, there are some guys, and none of those situations are the exact same. Can't just put a blanket here's what it was, on all of those things. You can't. But those were also not last year, right? Where South Carolina was, and it's not me saying this, it's Pete Nakos from On3, who covers the transfer portal and recruiting and retention and all those things, talked to a source, presumably one who's not a Gamecock fan, because it's probably somebody from another school or an agent or whoever, who said, I think South Carolina did the best job in the country in retention. Now, even if you say, no, it was actually, Clemson, or it was actually, whoever, there's no doubt they were up there. And so those things do matter, because recruiting matters, but you also want to keep guys in your program. You also want to draw guys to your program for the right reasons. It's great to have a guy on a commitment list and sign him, but if you get him there and he transfers after a year, or it's not what he thought, or, you're immediately butting heads or whatever it may be, as soon as the guy gets there, you don't want your locker room to break down. And Shane Beamer values that above all. And so I think that adding, like Darius Gray, I got a chance to interact with him, his mom and dad, his family, his coaches at St. Christopher on Friday. And I kind of really think, Kev, that he's kind of the poster child for what Shane Beamer wants. Really, anybody would want this kid, as his offer list indicated. You can't just sign guys that he's a great kid, because you can have a team full of great kids. It's not very good at football. But the good news about this is he is good at both. And I'll give a couple analogies here, or anecdotes is the right word, that his coach gave me. First of all, I mean, Darius is a basketball player. He plays defensive line in high school as well. And it was interesting that his coach said, look, I've coached for 20 years. My brother, Lance Clellan's brother, played at Notre Dame and played offensive line and defensive line. And Lance Clellan, Darius's coach, said, I've coached 12 guys who went on to play on the line at the Division I level. And he said, I really think Darius is the only guy who could go play Division I defensive line right now also. So that struck me. Just the athleticism, the versatility that he has. The other thing he said was, Darius is the type of guy where in practice, he gets off taking first team defensive reps, and instead of just taking a break, standing on the sideline, he volunteers to go play center on the scout team for offense, which, you just hear things like that. And then you watch the kid play and you see who all's recruited him. Hard not to get excited about that from just like the total package,
Yeah. And there's a point that you made there that I don't want to gloss over. And that's the fact that he's a basketball player.
Yeah.
And a lot of people listening to this might be like, well, so what? This is football. Well, there is a direct correlation between big guys who play basketball and big guys being able to move better than other big guys. Like, Full stop. Almost every football coach in America will tell you that. In fact, a few weeks ago, Travian Robertson was telling Gamecock Central that he really likes to look for basketball players when he's looking for defensive linemen. Now, Darius Gray isn't going to play defensive line at South Carolina, as far as we know. He's an offensive line prospect, 5-star. But when you think about that principle, that he is a big guy who can move and has good feet, that is a moldable player. So you take his already kind of ridiculous traits that he's got and his work ethic that he's got and his character that he's got, and you put it with a guy who's already advanced with his feet, who has no problem moving, who's explosive. He's not nearly as tall as a lot of other offensive linemen, but he dunks a basketball with ease, like off the vertical, just goes up and dunks like it's no big deal. That's something that you can't just gloss over. Like the fact that he is a big guy who plays basketball means something, and he plays it well. He was state player of the year for his level. Like he's not just some dude that gets 5 rebounds because he's strong. Like he was the state player of the year.
Yeah. Well, and you think about that with offensive linemen in the football field. A lot of times when we take a first look at an offensive lineman, what's the first thing you generally look at? I think this is the case for everybody. Oh, he looks good. Like his size, right? That's a big kid. Or if you see a guy and you see he's listed at 6'6", 310, whoa, look at this guy. But you got to dive in. Can he move, right? Because there's a lot of guys that are that size, and you look at them and maybe they're, and I'm not trying to be negative here, like derogatory, but like they're a little sloppy, and is weight going to be a problem? Is reshaping going to be a problem? What's the work ethic? Can they move? Can they bend? I mean, think about Dylan Stewart's, even in the SEC, don't grow on trees, but there's a lot of guys that are in that same category that we've seen roll through this league in the past, just 10 years, 20 years, whatever. This is the league that had Jadeveon Clowney and Dylan Stewart. And I mean, you name it. Pick any other school. You can pick out, here's their top 5 defensive ends that are all animals. Trying to block guys like that or block Walter Nolan, on the interior. If you can't move, I don't really care how big you are, So you look at Darius Gray, all the traits are there: movement, strength, explosiveness, the IQ, right? And so the other thing along those same lines that I asked his coach was, well, what do you think? Where do you think he's going to play in college? South Carolina seems to like the idea of, hey, let's just get him here and figure it out. Like he can, they probably got some ideas, but they said, hey, we'll play you wherever. He said, look, I'll give it to you simple. He could play all 5 of them, So where do you like him when you watch him?
It's hard because you look at pretty much any high level offensive line prospect, and unless they play at a really big school with another really big prospect, they pretty much all play left tackle, right? And that's true for Darius, though he does have some reps on the inside as well, right? But he played a lot of tackle, and you look at it, you're like, yep, looks really good at tackle. But then you look at his movement ability, and you think about what South Carolina likes to do in the run game. And you're like, man, I don't think any defensive lineman, like edge player or linebacker in the country, would want to get in his way when he's pulling around the edge.
Yep.
And not only get in his way, he can go find him and catch up with him and lead the way. There's some guys you watch them pull, and you see a running back, like they have to like slow down to get behind them, which sometimes works out, sometimes doesn't. Darius Gray can move and get through there, and if you happen to get in his way, he's going to crush you while he's looking for somebody else to take down too. Like that, it's really intriguing to think about. And here's me making a case for all 5 positions, I guess. But then you look at his football IQ and his what seems to be high level leadership ability, and you're like, man, you know what? That center position seems pretty good. That seems like because a lot in a lot of offensive lines, like, man, that's kind of the captain of the line, helps make calls with the quarterback. Man, if I had to nail it down, I probably would say guard just because of South Carolina's scheme. But you could tell me any of the 5 positions, because you can look at right tackle even and see a guy who you could run behind, but then also you could do a lot of cool things on rollouts to his side, because he could stay in front of the quarterback and serve as a personal protector there. There's so many different things you could do. But if I had to pick one, I'd probably say guard.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's kind of where I'm at too. If you feel like in your scheme that Darius Gray, it's in some ways not the exact same. It's similar to if you have a skill player with a unique skill set. What is it about? It's about, let's find ways to get the ball in his hands. You know, you're not going to take your best receiver and let's put him outside and have him run a go route all the time, right? People love go routes and slants. Let's run a slant every play. Let's run a go route every play. What you're trying to do as an offensive coordinator is find guys with unique skill sets who can make things happen in space and find ways to get the ball in their hands on the offensive line. Schematically, if you feel like, all right, for what we're trying to do on offense, this guy would be elite at this particular spot. And I do think guard makes sense from that standpoint, Kev. Then yeah, at the same time, I have become more and more intrigued by the idea of center because of all those boxes that he checks. You know, when you're looking at leadership, making calls, football IQ, you got to be able to move if you're a center too, right? It's extremely important to be quick, be able to move in space. Those guys are pulling too. They're climbing to the second level. Man, I just go through that and say, he checks that box. He checks that box, right? So I do feel like he's best suited to play somewhere on the interior. And I think regardless, South Carolina is getting a really good football player. His coach, Kev, used what I think is the best adjective that a coach could use for a football player: transcendent. That's a pretty good, it's a pretty powerful adjective, I think.
Yep. And it fits, right? Because you think of what that word means, and just that basically he could be successful in any situation at any time in any kind of way. And that says a lot about his ability, but also about his willingness to do that. I saw a quote from Darius, and you'll have to forgive me. I don't remember if it was in one of your stories or elsewhere, but I saw a quote from Darius where it was asking about his future position. And he started off, he's like, I can play left tackle, I can play right guard, I can play center. And then he's like, I can play water boy.
Yep.
He did. He said, I can do whatever the team needs me to do. And that mentality is something that just, again, we keep saying it fits perfectly into this culture. And even when you think stylistically, South Carolina offensive linemen, what they valued are high effort players too. Because not all big dudes who play on the offensive line are willing to be high effort players, if we're being honest. They're willing to play really hard for a few seconds and then watch. But if you look at South Carolina on some of their biggest plays of the year, last year, like you can just go back and watch the film, you'll see big Torricelli Simpkins running downfield trying to hit a cornerback on a screen pass. You can see, Vershawn Lee running down and blocking a linebacker that has no idea that he's coming, because these guys keep playing. And that is what you're going to get with a Darius Gray, both from an effort level and a conditioning level. I mean, I've seen a picture of the dude with his shirt off. He's kind of got abs, and he's an offensive lineman. Like, that tells you what his conditioning is like. Like, this guy is going to be one who's going to give you 100% every play. And I think that fits what they want from an on-field culture too, not just the off-field.
Well, and I think the off-field services the on-field, right? A lot of times we've looked back at, it is 100% of the time the case that if you go back, well, actually I should step back. Most of the time, the overwhelming majority of the time, a team that wins a national championship has a team that's loaded with talent, and they typically have a great talent at quarterback. If you want to pull back, I can pull out this example, maybe Auburn under Cam Newton would be the one, because he was so transcendent that he could take a team where nobody else on that team became really an NFL player and take them to the national championship. So the point I'm trying to make is that, yes, you have to be extremely talented to be a team, but we've seen to win a championship. We've seen a lot of really talented on paper teams though that fall apart. Why is it? It's typically because the culture falls apart, and then you have guys reading their own headlines, or they're in it for themselves. and they're not doing things like they're doing the thing where they play hard for 2 seconds and stand around or whatever. They can't weather the storm. And I think that has been Shane Beamer's best attribute here. How many times has a season, a game, whatever, been dead and buried for Shane Beamer at South Carolina? And then, boop, here they come, lo and behold.
Right.
It happened last year. We saw it last year individually with Lenora Sellers, which is crazy to think about, but it happened. Or just after the Old Dominion game. Well, that's a lost season, because they squeaked out a win over Old Dominion. Being able to keep the guys engaged matters. So it is exciting to think about being able to continue to build the program and the talent. And if you can maintain that culture, especially in the NIL era, where you could potentially go, now still a very tough road to climb. Not saying it'll happen, but this is how Shane Beamer wants to build the program. And so Darius Gray, I think a potentially signature get, I think, for the program. We're going to dive, Kev, now. Did you have any closing thoughts on Darius Gray that you didn't get out before we move on here to some?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add is that if you look at Rivals player rankings, like individual player rankings, South Carolina has the top 2 interior offensive linemen in the country in the class of 2026 coming in, with Darius Gray and Zion Giles, right? These are 2 dudes, really, really good. Charles Power, talent evaluator, on 3 Rivals, has used the word ferocious to describe them both. Those are good words for offensive linemen, in case you weren't aware. Ferocious, that's a good word to use. And when you're bringing in a top 100 quarterback, which you are in Landon Duckworth, you got to be able to protect him in the future, and maybe those guys will get on the field soon enough and it'll even be other quarterbacks. But you look at that class and you're like, Duckworth's got to be pretty happy that he's got both of those 2 guys coming in. And, Anthony Baxter, as well, as a guy that the staff likes. They wouldn't have taken his commitment, especially so early, if they didn't, right? So this is more talent stacking on the offensive line, but you're doing it in the best way possible because it's not just good talent, it's elite talent.
Yep, that's a great point. We'll move on to some football, but Kev, first, let's tell everybody about a couple of our partners here. Ferry Chevrolet, ferrychevrolet.com, or 803-937-4531. If you're a Gamecock fan out there who's interested in a new or used vehicle, make sure you check out our friends over at Ferry Chevrolet in Orangeburg, led by a 4th-generation dealer in Joseph Ferry. The family-owned business over at Ferry Chevrolet has been serving the community since 1926. It is conveniently located just off of I-26 between Columbia and Charleston. They're local, they're trustworthy, they're always transparent. The business began in St. Matthews and was built on honesty, integrity, and a handshake, and they still operate with those same principles to this day. So head on over to ferrychevrolet.com today. Check out their inventory and get in touch. Again, that's ferrychevrolet.com. We'll be seeing those guys, excuse me, Kev, also on GamecockCentral.com this season. And then one more partner to tell everybody about before we get rolling here into some football. Our friend Brandon Cohn over at Palmetto Golf and Belts, palmettogolfing.com. Brandon's got a brand new store up. Not brand new, few weeks old now. Got some great stuff, new products coming, custom golf gloves, custom golf tees, custom golf towels, all available in the South Carolina Garnet, the cross design, the palmetto tree and moon design, and more. And one of the coolest things in the shop, the needlepoint belts. If you like belts, if you like needlepoint belts specifically, they get pretty pricey. Brandon's at palmettogolfing.com are extremely well made, but they're also more affordable than many of the others out there on the market. Big South Carolina fan, longtime member over at GamecockCentral.com, Palmetto Golf and Belts at palmettogolfing.com. Our members over on the Insiders Forum are loving the products that he has in the store. So go check them out. If you're a golfer, you definitely need to check them out. If you're not, go find somebody a gift. palmettogolfing.com. All right, Kev, let's roll back into it. So Gamecocks kick off on Sunday, and man, there are so many ways that we could take this thing. Let me start with a housekeeping note. Rasul Faison, as of 2:34 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, still not cleared to our knowledge. So there's that. Will he be cleared? If so, when? I do not know. I can't tell you how many times I've heard some version of it's at the end. It should be any time now. I've heard that a lot. I've heard it for a while now. And at some point that will come true, but I don't know if today's that day or it's Tuesday or Wednesday or Saturday or after the Virginia Tech game. I don't know. But that's where we are right now. So we will continue to monitor that. And if we know anything, y'all know about it as soon as we know over at GamecockCentral.com. So, Kev, we could take this a variety of ways, but the first thing, Wes and I, presumably Wes, maybe you, who knows, we'll have our Virginia Tech kind of official game preview. We typically like to do that on Thursdays. I don't know if we'll also push that a day more since the game's on Sunday. We'll see. Let everybody know. Just turn on your notifications here on YouTube and you'll find out. But the first thing is, let's dive into Virginia Tech a little bit. Man, what do we know about Virginia Tech? Let's not get too deep. We got more meat on that bone throughout the week, but what do we know about Virginia Tech that we need to know right here on Monday?
I mean, like is true with so many teams, I think you have to start with the quarterback position. Kyron Drones is a guy who's played a lot of football. Last year was cut short by an injury, but he's pretty dynamic. His last 2 years, he's rushed for around 1,000 yards, and he's shown the ability to throw the ball too. He's not just a runner. So you can really see the potential for quarterbacks kind of trading blows in this game, where they can both, with Lenora Sellers and Kyron Drones, can both hurt defenses with their arm and with their legs. And I think when you are evaluating Virginia Tech, it's a little hard because they did have a lot of turnover, which can be a good thing. It could be a bad thing. So last year, the fact that they lost so many close games, I believe it was I believe they lost 5 games by a touchdown or less, if I'm remembering correctly. That's right. That is a factor, but you also got to think, but they've got 35 new players. It's a team that had a lot of turnover, and head coach Brent Pry is in a situation where he's got to win. Mm-hmm. If he does not win, things might get uncomfortable by the end of the season. His seat might be a little warmer than he would like. And so you got to factor all of that in when you're thinking about Virginia Tech.
Yeah, the thing that stands out to me, and I think it's a more extreme example than South Carolina. Every single team going into week 1 has some questions. Even for teams like, Clemson has been a darling in this offseason, in part because, they were pretty good last year. They made the playoff, won their league, all that. They're a good team. Yet South Carolina beat them. They were better, but Clemson was a good team, right? They were a tough out, and they returned so much on that team. Even Clemson has questions from their biggest one that everybody's talking about is the defense fixed? So that's a question. And we'll get kind of an answer to that in week 1, but we'll be able to properly assess that really at the end of the season, not game 1, not game 4. Really at the end, you'll be able to go back and look. They have fewer questions, and you could put other teams in that category too. A lot of teams are breaking in new quarterbacks. Texas, another playoff team, they're breaking in a new quote-unquote quarterback. It's Arch Manning. He's played some, but this is his first year as a full-time starter. So even Texas at Ohio State, national champion, new quarterback, some new players. Had 2 backs go early in the draft. They've got questions. South Carolina and Virginia Tech also have questions, and we're going to get some answers in game 1, but again, we're not going to get all the answers. Were our questions about South Carolina answered in the Old Dominion game last year? No, it actually created more questions, I would say, and those eventually got answered. They turned out to be a really good team. Virginia Tech, man, is kind of an extreme example. They got new coordinators on both sides of the ball, offense and defense. Right. And as you said, they had a kind of a clear out And so they're bringing in a lot of new players. The question is, how good are those players? How well do they integrate? What did they lose? If you ask guys in Blacksburg, the posture seems to be more of what we brought in from a net standpoint is better than what went out. We'll see, right? But I think kind of hard for both of these teams to prepare for game one, because, man, there's just so many questions here. But for South Carolina trying to game plan against Virginia Tech, yeah, you can go back and watch Philip Montgomery's stuff and all his time as an OC and the guys he's worked for. But, man, there's just so many new faces and some new schemes and personnel. Both sides are going to have wrinkles. It's kind of a hard deal to go into this game one.
Yeah, and Tootin is gone.
Yep.
Right, the running back, probably their best overall performer last year. There's a big question mark surrounding the majority of that team because even with Drones, who we talked about being a good player at quarterback, he did end last season on an injury. And anytime that happens, like, well, what did the offseason look like? Was he able to practice as much? Because, they're never going to reveal all of that type of information. How much was he able to play? There were pictures even from this spring where he was not full go.
Yep.
Right. So you gotta kind of put a question mark even beside him too. But as you mentioned, South Carolina has their own questions. And especially last year, but we saw it also in 2023, even though it didn't end quite as strong. And in 2022, the end of the season was much better than the beginning of the season. Could that even be a factor in the season opener? South Carolina has, to a certain extent, gotten off to some slower starts. That's something to wonder about heading into the opener as well. Can South Carolina reverse that trend and start off really well and kind of pave the way for what many are saying could be a 5-0 type of start before you head into the most difficult part of the schedule?
Mm-hmm.
Or do things maybe not go as well? Like these are all things that are going to be talking points after Sunday.
Well, and that's the thing that I think we get in our bubble and we forget about sometimes is that when South Carolina lines up, we can try our best to assess the type of team that South Carolina can have. And that's going to be very imperfect because, frankly, there's too many questions. I don't have any idea if they can make a 45-yard field goal in a pressure-packed situation. I don't know. Couldn't tell you. It's not because nobody's ever done it on the roster. I can't tell you for sure how the defensive line is going to perform. If the same guys as last year were all coming back, I could give you a really good idea because I could say they're probably going to be pretty salty, but they don't have a lot of those guys back. Linebacker, I can look at it and say they got some talent at linebacker, but do I know for sure how they're going to perform? I do not. I don't know those things. Nobody does. We can take our best guess and our best estimate, right? So let's zoom out. Here's the other point I was trying to make. I got myself off track. We forget sometimes, even in trying to assess the team, that South Carolina's playing other teams, a lot of whom on paper could be better than last year. Oklahoma, I'm guessing, is not going to be completely inept on offense this year.
Right.
Alabama is one of the most talented teams on paper in college football, et cetera, et cetera. Then you got to play Clemson, LSU. Oh, you got to go to A&M. You got to go to Missouri. People are kind of glossing. Well, we finally beat Missouri last year. That's cool, but you got to go there this year, and that place has been a house of horrors, And so we forget sometimes that you can be like a capable football team and go get exposed when you play this type of schedule week in and week out. You got to show up every single week. And there's going to be a lot of, probably, if you're having to guess, there's going to be some close games that come down to a few plays here and there. So with that in mind, Kevin, here's where I want to go here at the end of the show. Let's zoom out. What are your biggest reasons for pessimism? Let's do two. I don't just made up that number. What are your two biggest reasons for, you can call it reasons for pessimism, two biggest concerns, two biggest question marks that South Carolina's got to solve, not necessarily in game one, but by the time the season's over, these would need to be solved in order for this team to reach its potential. What you got?
If I had to narrow it down to two, because there are several questions, right?
Yes.
But if I had to narrow it down to two, I think I would start with the defensive front seven, which that I know that's kind of cheating because I'm taking two position groups on the D-line and the linebackers. But, you've got a lot of talent there. But other than Dylan Stewart, nobody is overly proven, right? You've had guys, like Brian Thomas, who have had some good moments and have been good at certain roles, but you don't have anyone other than Dylan Stewart in that front seven who has been a consistent high-level performer in a heavy role. Will that be something that is a recurring issue throughout the season? Or will it be something that it's like, man, it's not quite the same as last year when 4 defensive tackles went off to the NFL, but man, it's close. Because if you get that, then you're looking at a salty defense. But if you have a group that you're like, yeah, I can tell they lost a lot of talent, then you get in a situation where Dylan Stewart can draw a lot of attention without other guys being able to take advantage, then maybe you're in trouble. And the linebacking group, a lot of speed, a lot of willingness to be physical, a lot of coverage ability, a lot of even like pass rush juice, things that you like. But they hadn't shown it in a game yet, at least not at South Carolina. Sean Murphy had some good moments before he got hurt. Justin Okoronkwo hasn't really played yet, though Alabama was upset about losing him from what we heard, right? And everybody has been raving about Fred J.R. Johnson since even last year when he was behind, 3 high-level linebackers and didn't get to play as much. Those guys were like, man, this kid's really good. So the talent is there. The ability is there. We just got to see it. And then I guess for the other one, I will say that I'm not as concerned about this group in the long term for the season, but maybe early, I'll mention the wide receiver group. I think there are some good players who, whether because they're relatively new to the position or because of some injuries or whatever, haven't quite played to as high of a level as you maybe had hoped last year. Nick Harbor is just now going into his 3rd year as a wide receiver. Like, we can't understate that enough. This is his only 3rd year playing the position, and his first one in which he had a full off season.
Yep.
Because he was running track the other time. So we're going to get Nick Harbor with a full off season of football. We're going to get Jared Brown, presumably healthy. We're going to get Vandrevius Jacobs, presumably healthy. Neither one of those guys were healthy all year last year. They were playing hurt and missed some time. So, like, even when they were in the lineup, they were hurt at times. You got a ton of freshman talent, really good players. Who are they going to be really good as freshmen? We don't know. We've heard a lot of good reports about some guys. Brian Rowe, the guy I've been high on since he committed to South Carolina. He's a guy that we've heard good things about, but he hasn't done it in a game yet. So is South Carolina going to be at a point where you feel good about the weapons that Lenore Sellers has? Because last year, the wide receiver position didn't produce quite at the level you hoped. The tight end position was great because Josh Simon put up very quietly, because nobody seems to want to acknowledge it, put up one of the best seasons in program history from the position, setting a new record for touchdowns caught by a tight end.
Yep.
Michael Smith's really talented, but he was only in a part-time role last year. What are we going to get from the passing game, specifically the pass catchers for Lenore Sellers?
Yeah, great points. And it's interesting because I definitely see what you're saying about receiver, and you laid out a really good argument for it. I can't really articulate why even. I almost feel like if you're projecting linebacker versus receiver, why is it that I feel like I have more questions about linebacker, even though you look at that room, it's a talented room. Whereas I'm looking at receiver and going, this is a pretty talented room. and you're having to project, if you think both of those groups, linebacker and receiver, are going to be good, for some reason, I just project receiver like I have less questions. It almost doesn't make sense. But I think when you're talking about linebacker, you're talking about scheme and having to tackle people, and you're having to talk about working in conjunction with the front four that has some questions. I don't know. Just in my mind, it's a little different to where
Sure.
I will say this, feel better about the receiver room than going into last year. Like, no doubt in my mind about that. But that is an interesting point. I totally agree on your front seven. For me, more specifically, the front four, but the front four affects those linebackers. One of the reasons South Carolina is so good at linebacker, not to take any credit away from those guys, but they were free to roam around there, because of the plays the guys made up front and how they played stylistically. I would also just say, man, just the overall experience level. Like, if you listen to Shane Beamer all offseason, what is he keyed in on? And that is experience. He talks about it all the time. It matters. Experience, leadership. That's very, very broad. But we're sitting here talking about a kicker and a punter and a holder and a snapper and receivers and linebackers and all these guys, to where there's such a gap in that, whether it's experience or leadership or both, that is a question. I think those things matter. Some teams that were less experienced after the Alabama game last year, maybe that team folds up a little bit, but South Carolina didn't. They used it and they said, "Yeah, we're good. We're going to keep it rolling and we're going to go on a run." And that's exactly what they did. So that's not like an individual player or position group, but like that is a big concern. I think going in, it's a question you have to answer. All right, so let's go to the other side. If South Carolina can reach their potential this year, two things that give you optimism that they can ultimately do that.
Well, first, I do want to clarify something, because I probably should have said front six in the modern football world rather than front seven.
We understood. Yeah, we understood.
Because, they're typically playing with a nickel. But anyway, reasons for optimism. It's going to sound cliche. It's going to sound like the easy answer. But sometimes these things are the easy answer because it's the right answer. And I think you have to start with Lenore Sellers. Like, can you really start anywhere else? You're talking about a guy who is a top 10 Heisman candidate by virtually every betting outlet out there, including, BetMGM. Last I looked, he was the number 6 guy in Heisman Trophy odds. Like, that's got to mean something. You've got a guy who ended the year last year as he led South Carolina 6 wins in a row, 4 over ranked teams. He set a new single month South Carolina football record for touchdowns with 16 in the month of November. And he did it in a variety of ways. Some games he was just an unstoppable runner. Other games, like against Missouri, he threw 5 touchdown passes. And that was as a redshirt freshman. And as a redshirt freshman who honestly only played about 8 games fully healthy, because he missed 1 game, missed another part of another, and was definitely not healthy for at least 1 other game, potentially 2 more. You get a full off season for him to be healthy, for him to continue growing, for him to continue getting more and more familiar with what Mike Shula wants him to do. That much more experience. You talk about experience as a potential question mark. You got to feel pretty good about your quarterback experience now that he's had a year as the starter. Like, Lenore Sellers is the reason why you have optimism about this team. If you had to narrow it down to one thing, it's got to be Lenore Sellers. But I think to move past the most obvious, I want to kind of maybe challenge some thoughts that many in the South Carolina fan base have, and say that I think the South Carolina offensive line is going to be pretty good.
Okay.
I think that you've got, one, a lot of talent. We've been talking about earlier, we're talking about Darius Gray and how that's kind of the culmination of stacking talent over the years. We're seeing some of that talent stacking come to fruition. 5-star Josiah Thompson is heading into his 2nd year as the starter at left tackle. That's not been 100% confirmed, but that's happening, right? You know, Josiah Thompson's going to play left tackle. You've got some high quality players who came in from the transfer portal. It's been all but said that Boaz Stanley is going to start at center. And he was a guy who was a junior college All-American before having a really, really good year at Troy, and has frankly come in and even outperformed expectations at the center position. Everything that we've been hearing since the spring on true freshman Shed Surratt is that he is a stud and is one of the players really truly vying for a starting position on the offensive line. We will see if he does earn that, but the fact that he is pushing that hard tells you how good he can be. And you've got other transfers who are in the mix. You've got even returners in Kason Henry and Tree Babalade potentially battling at right tackle, and you've got at right guard, you got Trovon Ball, who's had a lot of good reports about him this offseason, including like fixing his body, that he didn't really lose any body weight but shed like almost 10% body fat. Like, that's impressive, right? He's just a ball of mean muscle now, and that's what you like on the inside of your offensive line. I have some optimism about those guys. I know, and I understand that they have to prove it because it's been inconsistent, we'll say, and sometimes flat out not good enough.
Yep.
But I think that changes in 2025. I think there are good enough players who have played enough now and are familiar enough with the system and with their teammates that I think it's going to be a good unit.
Yeah, again, another, projection, but like if it's something you feel good about, just like if you're projecting that you don't feel as good about something because of a question mark, totally makes sense. Yeah, I mean, starting with 16 to me is very obvious. I think, part of this is South Carolina, I think, is a better football team if Rasul Faison gets cleared. We don't know if he is or not, sitting here at 2:56 p.m. Eastern on Monday of game week, but we'll see. But man, I think because South Carolina does have special teams questions and defensive questions more so than on offense, for me, a lot of the reason for optimism, that's not to say that both sides, those other two phases of the game can't be solid for South Carolina. Am I going to sit here and say I think either of them are going to be dominant? I can't say that. I feel like that would be kind of a leap. But is it a leap to say I think South Carolina's offense is going to pick up where they left off and be better than last season? I don't think that's as much of a leap. So for me, thinking about this team reaching its potential, I think that's where you go. The more playmaking ability, whether it's Sellers or some of the pieces around him, but also, I'm optimistic that South Carolina won't be so poor in the turnover game this year. That's a huge part of it. Kind of gets lost, right? We think about scoring points and being explosive, but can you not turn the ball over? Can you be better in the red zone? Things like that. And I think the answer to those is yes, I think they can be. And so if they can live that out, so to speak, on the field, then I think they're in a better spot. So, all right, y'all, we're close to an hour here. We got a lot more ground to cover throughout the week. So one more housekeeping note, make sure you like, comment, subscribe to our channel. If you turn on your notifications, you'll know every time that we go live or drop a new video. I'm also going to drop a link here to YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, wherever you're watching. It's our newsletter. So make sure you join our newsletter. If you're on there, we will not spam you to death. We will never spam you. We will not email you to death. So you'll get breaking news alerts. You'll get something every now and then. You're not going to get 59 emails per day. It's free to join. I know a lot of you listen are already members of Gamecock Central. We appreciate you. Even if you're a member, join it. If you're not, get on there, check us out. Come check us out on the Insiders Forum on GamecockCentral.com. Kev, we say this a lot. There's never been a better time to join than before the season because, man, there's a ton of content coming. And, we appreciate our sponsors, Clint Hammond, Palmetto Golfing, Ferry Chevrolet, Andy Luedecke at My Perfect Franchise. Kev, any closing thoughts before we get out of here?
All I gotta say is that football season is here, Chris.
Man, I know. I
It
cannot
is
wait.
here.
It is here. It's glorious. Football weather is here even.
Yes,
Like
I mean, highs in the low 80s and upper 70s. What are we?
yeah, what are we even doing? But I love it. I do know that. All right, so come check us out on GamecockCentral.com. I'll be back maybe with Kev, maybe with what? We're going to keep in mystery, the intrigue of the season. You never know. You don't know what side I'm going to be on when I'm back. Will I be on the left? Will I be on the right? You'll just have to tune in to find out. So appreciate everybody. Thanks for watching. It's been GC Live. For Kev, I'm Chris. Y'all have a good one.